Hello, good afternoon. It is your host, Emmanuel Isaiah Smith, and today's date is Wednesday, November 12th, 2025. The time is 1:22 p.m., and I am in Doral, Florida. The topic of today's lecture is Wild Wild West. And before I start this lecture, I would like to address a number of matters. The first matter relates to yesterday's lecture on gangstalking as a product. I had a severe bout with nasal incongestion, and you will hear me sniffling throughout that lecture because of that incongestion. And I felt compelled to do the lecture anyhow, despite the incongestion, because I simply wanted to get the word out then and there. I didn't want to wait. So I have that same incongestion to a lesser degree today. So you may see a bit of a change in the dynamic of my voice. It may be a bit nasally, and I may have to sniff on occasion to clear my sinuses, as I did yesterday. I would also like to address this dynamic that I'm seeing concerning an uptick of gangstalking activity when I do or say certain things. It's like this. Plainly put, it doesn't matter to me where I knew you or from what time period in my personal or professional life, okay? If you participate in a street theater, surveillance, covert, signaling, disguise, or other such behavior in order to find out about my person, my significant other, or to place yourself in my general vicinity for espionage purposes, then you are a gang stalker. Okay? I have no business with you at all. It don't matter if I knew you from middle school, high school, college, a former neighborhood I lived in, from a church I attended, or from an occupation that I may have held. It does not matter to me where I knew you from. If you use any method outside of a phone call, text, email, or social media message to get in contact with me, then you are participating in something called espionage. Okay? I do not care if the form of espionage used is considered legal, illegal, or simply unexamined. Okay? If you use any type of espionage mechanism to put yourself in my vicinity or cause any form of disruption, pestering, or annoyance in my immediate location or my trajectory or path forward, then I am addressing you personally here now, as I have in previous lectures. This project is not for you. Likely you tune into this project to look for conflicts and not truth. You probably look at my various web pages for instances of mentions of you or people you know or circumstances that may have involved you, so you could create some sort of a stir and cause some sort of a situation where you draw attention to yourself, either at my expense or at the expense of my project. Go away. This project is for people who seek the truth. Okay, if you're the type of person that likes to look around for instigations all over the place, so you can report them to people, or tell people, or make insinuations or create false narratives behind what you see or hear, so you'll have a reason to continue keeping me in your mind's eye. Go the hell away. Okay, I am not talking to you with respect to what I say in this project. What I say in this project is for people who seek the truth and who apply the truth to their lives and to the lives of their significant others. I am going to stop the opening here, and I'm going to start back over with the original lecture. Thank you. Hello, ladies and gentlemen. This is a continuation of the Wild Wild West lecture. I would like to remind you that the first part of that lecture sorts to the lecture, or rather a prelude to the lecture, concerning persons that use the gangstalking mechanism using my project, and various topics, responses, statements, and assertions made on my project that they like to think is directly aimed at them, at which point they use the false narrative mechanism, which all gangstalkers use. Mind you, ladies and gentlemen, gangstalkers are a very gelatin lot. Okay, the type of person that participates in clandestine gang stuff is a gelatin person. I mean, this is the type of person that if you were in a situation on a battlefield, for example, and you were a soldier and one of your fellow soldiers in your unit were in the trenches, right? And you were fighting a hot battle against an unnamed enemy. And you're dead in the middle of a exchanging fire with the enemy. Your side is exchanging fire, their side is exchanging fire. And let's say one of your comrades gets hit, and the morale of your troops goes down and the enemy starts advancing. You have two options in that situation if you're a soldier. You can fight your way out of it, or you can run or retreat, as they say. A gangstalker is the kind of person who in that situation, okay, would not only run for the hills, but they wouldn't even wait on instructions from their commander to retreat. They would start retreating on their own. Okay, in a situation where retreat is a strategic necessity, you're supposed to wait on instructions from your commander before you start retreating, because you may have to stay with your brothers in arms and fight the thing out. But while you all are returning fire with the enemy in the trenches, and your other comrade is laying on the ground with a bullet in his leg, while you and some of your other comrades are trying to help up your fellow soldier and get him to safety, the stalker in the trenches is going to get up, he's going to take off all his armor, he's going to put his gun down, he's going to take off his canteen because it's too heavy, he's going to jump out of the trenches, and he's going to run into the forest somewhere. The commander will be looking at him like, hey, where the hell you going? We're exchanging fire with the enemy here, you prick you. Why'd you run off? No one told you to do that. Meanwhile, the gelatin stalker, he's not even turning around looking. He's just running for the damn hills. While you and your comrades are trying to get your fallen soldier to safety, and the commander's sitting there scratching his helmet like, what just happened? We just had a soldier abandon his duty in the middle of an exchange with the enemy. We'll see to it that schmuck gets robbed of all his titles in the military. And we're going to document that he abandoned his brothers in arms in the heat of battle. All right, the kind of person that would do that is the kind of person that would take a signaling method, the kind of person that would use and return signals with people so that they can find a way to pester or harass whoever just to feel the ego boost of feeling like you're above the law, and then riding off into the sunset on a scooter or something. Right? That's what we're talking about here. Okay? The Wild Wild West narrative is about the formless, shapeless application of a method of social engineering that manifests in certain segments of the population getting ahead and others not, but not necessarily because of merit, not necessarily because of their socioeconomic background, not necessarily because of their demographic, but because of their capacity to use a covert system of communication or not. Okay, the concept of meritocracy is over. It's no longer about how you do your job or how well you do something. It's no longer about getting ahead based on your merits or your work ethic or your personal abilities or anything like that. Now it's about how well can you communicate hidden languages to people? How well do you know the lingo? How well do you know the physical gestures? How well do you know the vehicular maneuvers? How well do you know this covert form of communication or that covert form of communication? How well do you know it? If you know it well enough, and you're able to clandestinely communicate with the right people who also know that language, then you can simply move up and out and beyond towards success and prosperity unopposed. Why? Because it's no longer about competition in the workplace. It's no longer about competition in the athletic environment. It's no longer about competition in the corporate world. It's no longer about competition in the public sector either. How well do you communicate the hidden language? How well can you weather the storm? when mysterious things are being said and done around you, how well do you manage the situation? Do you manage it in your favor? Do you get angry about it and complain about it to people? Do you fight it? Do you run from it? Does it amuse you? Does it scare you? Does it entertain you? Does it annoy you? What does the clandestine communication method that so many millions of Americans are using right now to communicate to each other where to go and when to go, who to descend upon, when to descend upon them, when to excuse yourself from a room, when to come back to the room, when to make that left turn in your vehicle, when to make that right turn in your vehicle, when to wear a light suit, when to wear a dark suit to church. Okay, when to call the police and when not to. What company to work for and what company not to work for. All of these decisions that are typically made by individual people are now being made by individual people in tandem with what other persons want them to do. I'm not saying it's inherently wrong to take another person's advice about something. If a person recommends something, or even if a person instructs you to do something in the interest of the company or yourself or your family, your significant other, your community, etc., if it seems like a reasonable thing to do, you should do it. But if I'm instructing you to do something and I'm telling you in a hand gesture or a covert verbal command, or I'm using a vehicular maneuver to communicate myself to you so no one else knows what I'm telling you to do, well, that's suspicious. And you could be telling somebody to do anything, and then you have to follow the patterns that you see every day as a targeted person. If you are a targeted person, you have to see the patterns of behavior in the people around you. You have to see the patterns of the circumstances that happen around you, and you have to see the patterns of how people react to you generally in order to ascertain whether or not you're a targeted person. What is the Wild Wild West, ladies and gentlemen? Well, I'll have to remind you that gangstalking is a state-sanctioned social engineering method that allows for a state-imposed covert communication method that some people are plugged into and some people are not. The people that are plugged into this covert communication method are able to communicate with each other in such a way so as to avoid detection by the people around them. Okay? Such a communication method can be used to do a number of things pretty much to anybody. I mean, and there's also a sort of a signaling mechanism where you can find somebody without knowing where they live. You start at point A, you follow the signals to point B. Even if the signals given to you are being given to you by third parties who have no idea who this person you're looking for is, you start at point A, you follow the signals to point B, and there's your target. What is the Wild Wild West, ladies and gentlemen? I am going to tell you how the Wild Wild West operates. And we're going to use South Florida as the template. And when I say South Florida, I mean typically anywhere from the Florida Keys to as far north as Port St. Lucie. So from the Florida Keys to Port St. Lucie, okay, that's typically what people would refer to as South Florida. I mean, Port St. Lucie is getting towards Central Florida, but it's still South Florida. So for the remainder of this lecture, I want you to picture the geographic area that is in between the Florida Keys and Port St. Lucie. So let me tell you what the Wild Wild West represents. The Wild Wild West represents essentially what you might refer to as a bunch of gelatin-minded, hostile, irritating thugs, okay, that are American citizens or residents that use a signaling mechanism with respect to the location of a targeted person. And they do this on the behalf of other people who themselves do it on behalf of an interested party. Okay? Somebody puts in an order, right? You talk to the right people, you make the right complaints, you badmouth this person in front of the right people. Eventually, you may run into a person that could get you plugged into a mechanism where you could say, man, I'd sure like to see that guy go to jail. I hate that guy. Or, man, I really wish that guy would get hit by a car. I can't stand him. Or you know what? That person right there, I have had so many problems with that person. I can't stand that person. I want to see something bad happen to that person. I want to see somebody rob that person one day. Or you could say, you know what? That person right there, I can't stand him. I want to see him get into a fight with someone real big and strong. Or you could put in the ultimate request. Hey, you know what? That guy, he thinks he's so much better than me. I want to see him get killed. If you say these types of things to the right person, attempts can be made to satisfy that demand. If you are plugged into gangstalking and you say things like that to the right person, attempts to satisfy your demand will be made against the other person. You understand? That's what gangstalking is. It pits one section of society against another section of society. The people who are plugged into gangstalking and the people who are not plugged into gangstalking. The people who are plugged into gangstalking can make arbitrary requests of harm to be done to party B. And those requests will be honored, or attempted rather, by clandestine third parties who take signals to that person's location with the instruction or the capacity to do them harm. That program is running amok here in the United States, and I want to talk about some of the things these wild, wild west schmucks, these useful idiots, these signal takers, these gang stalkers, these hostile third-party persons, these persons who have pestered me and my significant other Lori endlessly, particularly over the past 8 years, these germ-flinging disease spreaders, okay, these people that will follow you to the hospital if they have to, so they can signal the doctors and nurses inside to give you lackluster health care. Okay, the kind of people, and mind you, yes, hospitals have gang stalkers in them, ladies and gentlemen. Hospitals have people that utilize verbal commands, physical gestures, and other such cues to determine which patients they're going to give good health care to and which ones they're not. They don't just pick and choose, they work as a team. And they follow these gestures and verbal commands and signals and so forth, code words, to govern how they help or rather neglect patient A, patient B, or patient C. You have people that know these signaling mechanisms that go on inside of hospitals, and if a targeted person is injured by a stalker, okay, your liaison will signal other stalkers to follow you to the hospital so that they can continue to pester you inside. Okay, clandestine thuggery is the name of the game. Idiocy is the name of the game. Gelatin or spineless participants is the name of the game. And yes, ladies and gentlemen, we have just learned that the United States federal government has determined that Cuba, which is a country that is just 90 miles off the coast of Miami, is a state sponsor of terrorism and terrorist activities. You have to keep your eyes open if you're going to see the truth, but not only see the truth, but apply the truth to your life, to your existence, to your decision making. What is the wild, wild west, ladies and gentlemen? Well, here's the wild, wild west, okay? And this is how they do gang stalking down here. Okay, I'm not sure how they're doing it in other states. I've been in Florida continuously for about 8 years now. So I haven't been updated on how they do gang stalking in any other state, but down here, how do they do gang stalking? Well, germ flinging is a favorite harassment tactic of the stalkers here. They like to get around targets, of course, with the use of a signal, of course. They have to be pointed at a target and proceed to fling germs in any capacity they can, using any bodily function that they can use at that moment. It could be a cough, it could be a sneeze, it could be a loud, obnoxious yawn where they intentionally blow their infected breath your way. Okay? They could fling any type of bodily excrement or what have you up in the air so anyone around has to inhale whatever airborne bacteria they've just unleashed upon them. Okay, that's done in a synchronous, timed, and directed fashion. That's called germ flinging. Ladies and gentlemen, they also like to use chemicals here. Okay, they like to ride past people on moped scooters, on bicycles, on skateboards, other electronic or non-electronic transportation methods with chemicals they have in bottles or pots. Open the bottle, open the pot, open the container, fling chemicals at people, and ride off on whatever their transportation method is. You got people down here that are contaminating people's food with lead. They're putting lead in people's food, which could lead to lead poisoning. You got people around here that are taking signals to targets and throwing rocks and sticks their way. You got people shooting pellet guns and guns that shoot rocks at people. You got people down here that are using data interception methods so that they can see where a target is at all times, particularly through the GPS interception mechanism, and they are walking past targets and essentially committing acts of biohazardous terrorism against the target. Yes, it is bioterror. You have squads or units of citizens here that move out into the county and through directives that include signals, verbal commands, and vehicular maneuvers, go out and locate people to try and get sick with bacterial illnesses. Some of them running around flinging viruses at people. And they are doing so with state resources because it is wards of the state that are facilitating the biohazardous disease flinging here. Okay, and considering that Cuba has just been designated as a terrorist state by the United States, it makes me wonder how a county that is just 90 miles northwest of Cuba has persons in it that are first generations America from the Cuban state that are allowed to drive their vehicles in such a way that they are instructed to run people over with their vehicles. Okay, that's terrorism. You have units of people driving around Miami-Dade County that use their vehicles as weapons against pedestrians. How many pedestrians in Miami-Dade County have gotten killed because of one of these homicidal vehicular units? There's no telling. It's probably in the thousands. That's terrorism. How many people in South Florida during the COVID season died because you had biohazardous germ squads that were using signals to signal each other towards persons with an attempt to get them sick with COVID-19 in various capacities? That's terrorism. Bioterrorism at that. Why is terrorism and bioterrorism happening in a county that is just 90 miles northwest of a country that the U.S. federal establishment has just designated a terrorist organization? I mean, have you ever walked out to your vehicle having left home? Or maybe you're leaving your place of business, or maybe you're leaving a grocery store, and you walk out into the parking lot and you see your vehicle and someone has just smashed the windows out with a crowbar. Okay, it's the wild, wild west, ladies and gentlemen. No man is safe, no woman is safe, no child is safe. Everyone has to be on the lookout. Everyone has to be aware of their surroundings. Everybody has to be aware of the clandestine and covert signaling mechanism that has taken hold in this country and has permeated every crevice of the federal, state, and local territorial regions. Every jurisdictional region in the United States has a number of people that practice this signaling mechanism, and the signaling mechanism is aimed at disenfranchising persons, and you don't have to be of a particular demographic. Okay, my significant other, Lori, is Caucasian. She's a targeted individual. Okay, when I say no man, woman, or child is safe, no man, woman, or child is safe. That is not a euphemism or a metaphor. It is it's an empirical statement. How are juveniles used in clandestine gang stalking? A juvenile is somebody that's under the age of 18 years old. They have a juvenile delinquent system in the United States that houses 1 million juvenile delinquents that have been arrested for crimes in various parts of the United States. You do not have to have a criminal record in the juvenile justice system to be labeled a delinquent. And why is that? It's because I, your host, Emmanuel Isaiah Smith, am labeling every single juvenile in the United States right here and now that participates in clandestine gang stalking as a juvenile delinquent. You do not have to have a criminal record with me. You are a delinquent and you are an at-risk youth if you participate in a clandestine signaling mechanism in which people can point you to persons or places of business or residences that you are supposed to go and stir mischief in. And that's what gang stalking is, ladies and gentlemen. It is state-sanctioned mischief. It's state-sanctioned rape. It's state-sanctioned attacks and assault. It's state-sanctioned robbery. It's state-sanctioned murder. Okay, I'm not sure what national security apparatus had to give birth to modern-day gang stalking. Okay, the FBI's COINTELPRO program from the 1960s, which is the spiritual progenitor of gang stalking, as I often say, was the FBI's program to get rid of the Black Panther Party, the Ku Klux Klan, the American Communist Party, and other political dissident groups that it saw as subversive to society. And it worked. The plan worked beautifully in the favor of the FBI. It was apparently executed sophisticatedly into a T. And whatever threats were present during the COINTELPRO days is now gone. And mind you, the Ku Klux Klan, the Black Panther Party, and the American Communist Party of the 60s, they were all political dissident groups, but they were all political dissident groups that advocated the use of violence in some way. And I think their advocation of the use of violence, it was the reason the FBI put that program on them, COINTELPRO. Okay, and basically a combination of various, we'll call them dark tactics, were used on these persons privately and in public, at work and at home, to disrupt their personal lives so that their membership in those organizations would be less effective to the cause. Okay, is gang stalking terrorism? Yes. Do I believe that gang stalking was birthed from state-sanctioned mechanisms and programs? Yes. Does that make gang stalking state-sanctioned terrorism? Yes. Why, Smith? Because you don't know how many targeted persons over the past 60 years have perished because of the conditions imposed by this program. And if it's a state-sanctioned program and people are dying before their time because of the methods used in the program, then that's state-sanctioned murder, plain and simple. There ain't no telling how many staged or derived car accidents these flimsy, terroristic stalkers have caused in the last 60 years against persons who died. That's state-sanctioned vehicular assault and state-sanctioned vehicular homicide.
Bij dit avondlos vrijdagconcert aan het begin van de festiviteiten rond 40 jaar omroepmuziek in Vredenburg.
What are you trying to say, Smith? What I'm trying to say is this.
Gewoon op buitenprogramma met het Radio Philharmonisch Orkest onder leiding van Edo de Waard.
It pains me to talk about America, the country that I was born in. In the harsh and oftentimes brutal way that I do. It's not something I enjoy. I mean, coming up, I had a tremendous amount of gratitude for the framers of the U.S. Constitution for making the Constitution so pro-people. It's pro-populist. It's pro-everyman. It's pro-rights. It's pro-liberties. It's pro-freedoms. It's pro happiness. And I remember believing that I was very lucky to be here as a young person. But ultimately, apparently, my life's trajectory was placed in the hands of persons that hated the ground that I stand on, apparently. And my gangstalking campaign manifests as such. It's constantly a search for an opportunity to get me into some sort of a verbal or physical altercation with a person in which I could be harmed physically or legally. That's it. It is a bunch of gelatin actors behind the scenes who are signaling people to my location with the sole purpose of getting some sort of altercation or problem started so as to decrease the quality of my life. If I were working 18 hours a day in a steel mill, I would experience clandestine gang stalking from some of the workers there. If I were working in a power plant, the same thing. If I were a college professor, same thing. If I were in the armed forces, the same thing. If I were a corporate executive in some office building somewhere for some big Fortune 500 company, same thing. I've done my fair share of ignoring these persons. I experienced clandestine gang stalking in the state of Ohio while I was attending Cuyahoga Community College earning my Associate of Arts degree. But I ignored it and I obtained my degree anyway with honors. It's difficult to do that in a university setting because there are so many more students there and so many more faculty. And some of them use clandestine signaling mechanisms to find and locate persons. And sometimes when you walk past a person, they use a code word for you as you're walking past so other people in the area know who the mark is. All right, imagine coming out of your class one day and going into the parking lot to get in your car to leave, and someone has thrown a rock through your windshield. Or imagine going home and when you go to turn on your TV for the nightly news, someone has entered your home illegally, intruded into your living space, and damaged your television set, putting a crack in the screen. Imagine coming home from a road trip and there's a 10-inch scratch down the front of your door. Imagine people making false 911 complaints against you so as to make the police adversaries of yours rather than advocates of yours, because I'm advocates of the police. I've done semi-law enforcement work myself for the past 6 months in Kendall, Florida, in the Olympic Park area. How am I receiving false complaints against me to the very police that I'm assisting? Who's making these false complaints? It is you gang stalkers. When I first heard of the National Security Agency, when I first heard of the Department of Homeland Security, when I first discovered what the Department of Justice was and how it works with the Department of Defense through the use of fusion centers for an all-in-one law enforcement assistance and apprehension of violent persons and fugitives task force, I was impressed. I was like, wow, law enforcement, the military, it's evolving. This is great for society. But then I read somewhere that fusion centers have operations like the one I'm describing. And it makes me scratch my head like, well, what happened? Where's the habeas corpus? Where's the summons? Where's the formal charges? Where's the instructions for me as the defendant? Because that's what you are as a targeted individual. You are a perpetual defendant. And the court of law is your general surroundings. The judge, jury, and executioner come in the form of liaisons, operatives, and stalkers. They are pre-programmed to see you as the enemy, and that is how they encounter you. That is how they go about their business with you, ever how long or short that business is. Is there a religious element to this? Yeah. Can you go outdoors and say a loud prayer to your God that something bad happens to this other person? And if there are stalker elements that are recording that conversation between you and your God, and they want to make it look as if God has acted on your behalf, they could make something bad happen to the person you're praying about and make you get on your knees and thank your Heavenly Father for all the good He has done for you. There's no end to it. It is a cabal. It is a cabal, and targeted individuals are probably chosen as kids. Okay, I can remember being 10 years old, running into various people I knew in various places that you would not expect to meet those people. Places that were very far away from where you lived, places that were far away from where they lived. Maybe they're your classmates, maybe they're your teachers, maybe they're people that you've known from various recreational activities you've participated in, and you just happen to run into these people in the same in the same grocery store that you're in, arbitrarily without even trying. How is it that someone that you know bumps into you at a grocery store at the exact same time you're there? Or how is it someone you know from Miami happens to get on the same bus as you in Boca Raton somewhere? How is it that someone you know in Port St. Lucie runs into you in a shopping mall somewhere in Jupiter, Florida? How is it that someone you know in West Palm Beach happens to walk into a restaurant you're eating in Delray Beach? How is it that someone that you played racquetball with in Cutler Bay, Florida, goes to a bookstore you happen to walk in somewhere in Palm Beach Gardens, Florida? Some people do this. Hey, how's it going? Good to see you. What are you doing out here? Oh, hey, I was just in the area and I just decided to wander into this place. Oh, wow, what a coincidence. Great to see you. Okay, fine. I've probably done that myself over the years. But when that coincidence happens over and over and over and over and over again in various establishments in various parts of the state of Florida, eventually you're going to scratch your own head like, okay, now what is this? How is this many coincidences happening in this many different places at the exact same time I happen to be in this place? I'll tell you what's happening. It's called too many coincidences equal a derivation. If you experience too many coincidences of the same kind in various points in time without looking for those coincidences, it's probably a derivation of something else that's happening. You know, some people might ask you, well, what's your purpose in life, Smith? My purpose in life is to ensure the health and prosperity of my significant other, of my progeny, myself, to do my occupation with the utmost effectiveness, and to protect myself at all times. I think that is the purpose of most sane, energetic United States citizens. But when it gets to the point where just being a good citizen is not good enough for you, and not only is it not good enough for you, but you have a need to use various elements that have been embedded in society by stealth on the coattails of national security legislation to not only try to get ahead in the workplace or wherever, but to degrade the quality of life of other people in the process. Not just because you want to, but because you're directed to by like-minded persons who share the same communication mechanisms that you have. You know, me personally, I've seen a lot of culture in my day. And I've studied and identified with lots of cultures in my day. My name, Emmanuel Isaiah Smith, is a Hebrew name. And I was raised in the Christian cultural tradition. I have my own ideas of the supernatural now. But I was raised in a cultural tradition that resembled mainstream Christianity. And all of the stories that I've ever heard concerning the Bible happened in a specific region, the Middle East, Greece, and Rome. You know, I studied Arabic in college so I could find more in-depth perspectives on the Middle East. I wanted to take Hebrew and Arabic, but they only offered Arabic at this particular college. But I wanted to connect to the Middle East in some way because of everything that was happening. And I learned a lot. And that's a very volatile region of the world. But I can assure you that whatever's happening in the Middle East right now is nothing compared to what targeted individuals face in this country over the past 60 years. Okay? And I can assure you that if gangstalkers in the United States had access to chemical weapons and cluster bombs and biological weapons and improvised explosive devices and infected animals that they could sick on you to give you rabies or something. Or if they had access to ballistic weapons that were of a nature as to where their firing mechanism is suppressed, or if they had access to carbon monoxide resources, or if they had access to various poisons. These stalkers would use these items on the people in their general surroundings on a daily basis. Why? Because they know that they're backed by something very powerful. I don't think they know they're backed by an intelligence or national security apparatus, a covert intelligence or national security apparatus, but they know they're backed by something powerful. And they know that because they're backed by something powerful, that they are able to operate with impunity, no matter how bad the damage they're looking to do to the next person. Okay? There are no surefire ways to know who gang stalkers are or who they're not, or who a target is or who isn't a target, until you see the activity for yourself. And that's why the activity is designed to be difficult to ascertain or detect, so it can operate with impunity. Why? Because the activity itself is hostile, it's violent, and it's disruptive. And it targets people. And ultimately, all a person can do is be watchful and try to avoid what's going on. Because if you confront what's going on physically, then you could get in trouble and your stalkers win. Okay, that's the point of continually pestering you with stalkers. They want you to get in some kind of a legal altercation, or some sort of an altercation that could land you in legal trouble. That's the point. I'm telling you, this program is very gelatin and very cowardly in its operation. The persons that signal the stalkers out do so with the commands of pestering a specific person. Not a person that looks like you, with the intent of either harming you physically or psychologically or legally. If they can't harm you physically or psychologically, they will try to get you into legal jeopardy with a stalker. Okay, you got stalkers out there that'll burn your house down with you in it. Okay, stuff like that. Real gelatin, real cowardly, real covert thuggery. Okay, somebody walks up to your car with a can of gasoline and sets your car on fire while you're inside your home sleeping. That kind of stuff. It is a conundrum in and of itself, and it is a wicked problem. Why? Because it could lead to serious embarrassments for the United States of America. It could lead to serious embarrassments for its citizens. It can lead to serious embarrassments for the national security apparatus and the intelligence apparatus of this country. It could lead to serious embarrassments. I don't think this country wants those embarrassments, but I do believe that there are certain people in various capacities that work for the United States of America at the executive level at the congressional level, at the Senate level, at the state level, at the mayoral level. I believe that there are politicians out there and other government workers in various auxiliaries, including the Department of Defense and the Department of Justice, that would like to see gang stalking crushed, and they would like to see its participants prosecuted. I would like to see gang stalking entered into the U.S. legal code as a covert mobbing mechanism. Ladies and gentlemen, I oftentimes speak of the exploitative nature of gang stalking. You have churches that have members that participate in it. How and why? Well, to get ahead in the church. Churches have status and hierarchy just like any company does. To eliminate your competition. All right, if there's a new Sunday school opening present, and you got multiple people clamoring for that position, maybe one of them uses gang stalking mechanisms to get rid of the competition. And yeah, that's in a church. Children can also learn the clandestine signaling mechanisms that are present in clandestine gang stalking. Ultimately, you're not going to succeed in beating gang stalking until you can quantify what it is. I believe there are a lot of targeted individuals that don't know what gang stalking is. They just believe that the people around them act horribly to and about them all the time. There are entire families that use the clandestine gang stalking mechanism. A father teaches his wife and kids how to use signaling and pestering mechanisms. I call them stalker families. And then in other families, you have maybe just the dad uses it, or maybe just the mom uses it, or maybe just one of the kids use it. Okay? Ladies and gentlemen, there are whole communities that use this to disenfranchise persons. Okay? In Kendall, Florida, you have anti-pedestrian units that drive their vehicles in circles around the block. Some of them drive their vehicles up and down Southwest 88th Street, looking for opportunities to run people over with their vehicles. But they know specifically who to run over and who not to run over with their vehicles, because the people that they're supposed to run over with their vehicles, they get signals from pedestrians and motorists as to when to make that right turn and when to make that left turn. And if you see somebody standing there, you run them right over and you keep driving. Okay, I personally experience a sense of anxiety about my significant other, who I'm away from for various parts of the day while doing business-related matters with respect to her trajectory to and about Kendall, because of all the motorists that drive up and down the street who drive like absolute maniacs. Some might say, well, that's your opinion. No, it's the truth. Well, how do you prove it? Well, if I had a team of about 200 cameramen, or maybe if I had 200 hidden cameras at various points around the city of Kendall, particularly at crosswalks and intersections, and I had 200 people monitoring those cameras 24 hours a day, I would be able to prove to you that there are anti-pedestrian units of civilian motorists that drive up and down Kendall, east, west, north, and south, and some circle the city in a car, simply looking for people to run over. And they take signals as to who to run over and who not to run over. That's state-sanctioned vehicular homicide, ladies and gentlemen. And quite frankly, it isn't just these types of events. There are simply pestering mechanisms that people use to destabilize or degrade the quality of life of their fellow Americans. All they got to do is listen to a false narrative and take a few signals, and voila, you've disrupted somebody, you've obstructed somebody, you've harmed somebody, you've hindered somebody from attaining their constitutional rights concerning life, liberty, and happiness. It's state-sanctioned thuggery of the highest order. And some stalkers try to get the police involved because the police may not know what's going on until you say something. So they'll make up a false narrative and tell the police something about you that ain't true. And don't put it past gang stalkers to use the bully narrative, because that's a real big one. Okay? If you have enough stalkers that can try and label you as a bully, whether or not it's true, that was a quick way to get you thrown in a gang stalking campaign. I personally don't like bullies, and quite frankly, it seemed like every Hollywood movie that I've ever seen that was of an action or adventure or perhaps a good cop, bad cop movie, or perhaps one of those coming of age stories like The Karate Kid, for example, where there's a bully and he gets dealt with at some point in the movie. I mean, those are always memorable moments for moviegoers. Even in science fiction or horror movies, where you see teenagers or young adults acting in a deleterious manner, what happens? The villain in the movie, whether it's Jason or Freddy Krueger or Hellraiser or Michael Myers, the Blob, the Thing, Leatherface, what do? They deal with them in such a way that is very gory and gruesome. But I think that's the way most people look at bullies. But keep something in mind, you need evidence that a person is bullying somebody. But as I often say, gang stalkers don't like evidence, they like narratives. And if you create the right bully narrative against a person, you can get them stalked. And how do you fight against such a mechanism when there's so many different stalkers out there against just you? You can't fight them all physically. What you have to do is you have to get the word out and hope that Congress, the executive level of the president and the Supreme Court say, wait a minute, this don't look right, and this is not a constitutional way of life for our citizens, and ban the practice and make it illegal with stiff penalties and fines. Some people may ask you, Smith, why did you do a lecture while you were experiencing sinus and congestion? I did yesterday's lecture with sinus and congestion because I needed to get this particular lecture done. See, I impose deadlines on myself because I'm my own boss. And I wanted to do this lecture. You know, it's like Michael Jordan in that flu game back in 1997. All right, the NBA Finals against the Utah Jazz was entering its peak games. Jordan said, you know what? Yeah, I'm sick with the flu, but I need to be out here. I need to win this basketball game. And even while so sick that he could barely stand after the game, Michael Jordan put up 45 points and 8 rebounds. And they won that game, Chicago Bulls. I remember being an 11-year-old kid watching that game and being in awe of the athletic spectacle that I had just seen. Never have I seen an athlete persevere in the face of a sickness as Michael Jordan did in that basketball game. Every day is a flu game for me. Why? Because every day clandestine gang stalkers attempt to get me sick in some kind of way. Thanks to antibiotics, I can keep myself well. But stalkers attempt to get me sick every day with airborne bacteria. So every day is a flu game for me. But you draw inspiration from athletic contests like that. You draw inspiration from the heroes of antiquity. You draw inspiration from the heroes of Bible texts and Quranic text and the Eastern Indian and Oriental manuscripts. You draw inspiration from the ancient heroes of Europe and Egypt and Carthage and Tunisia and Africa and the Caribbean and the heroes of the Middle East. Okay, people who were seen as heroes of their day in ancient times and to the present day. Some people believe that heroes of modern times are people that persevere in the face of adversity and people who take on certain jobs. Like, for example, if you're in the armed forces, you're a hero. If you work in law enforcement, you're a hero. I tend to agree with that sentiment. So long as these heroes are not participating in clandestine gang stalking. If they're heroes and they do their job with integrity, yes, they're a hero. But if they're using clandestine signaling protocols, then I don't consider them a hero. Because how is it that a hero can be a person that uses clandestine signaling protocols to disadvantage other people? I don't consider that heroic behavior. But if you have a job where you daily face perils and you serve your country and your state and your community facing those perils, then you're a hero. But if you use clandestine gang stalking while you're doing your job to make your job more palatable, to make it easier, or to make it less dangerous, then you're not a hero. Because if you're taking signals, that means you are letting somebody else tell you what to do, and you're allowing another person to control your trajectory through time and space. And if you're taking signals, you're also taking signals with the expectation that you will encounter a person that you are supposed to descend upon with harassing or annoying tactics. Okay, if you're a person that uses electromagnetic weapons on people to harm their body, then you are a coward. If you are a person that hides behind a curtain or hides in a vehicle or hides in a residence or a business and you use covert weapons on persons, you are a despicable and gelatin person. It's the Wild Wild West, ladies and gentlemen. Yes, people are using electromagnetic types of attack mechanisms against persons. These electromagnetic attacks manifest immediately, and they are used by thuggish and cowardly and violent and hostile third parties against unsuspecting United States citizens anywhere. You could be anywhere. All of a sudden you feel a sharp pain in a particular part of your body, and that part of the body is not in any way afflicted or injured, but you just happen to feel a sharp or horrible pain in one particular part of your body. Chances are that that pain, which will likely last only a few minutes, is being perpetrated against you by some third-party nut job who is hiding somewhere with some sort of an invisible weapon, or maybe it's ultra-low frequency, pointing that weapon at a specific part of your body so as to harm or annoy you. Yes, ladies and gentlemen, this is Gangstalking in action. Thank you for tuning in.